So my name is Matti Hakamäki. I'm director of Finnish Folk Music Institute, and we have been organizing these Kaustinen ICH seminars for a few years now. And now the Kaustinen Folk Music Festival theme is peace. So we are now today here trying to see what's the connection between folk music, between intangible cultural heritage, and then peace building in many different ways and aspects. This year is also the anniversary, 20 years anniversary for the UNESCO 2003 convention, and this is also official event of this celebration year. So we are in good company. And next we will hear some theoretical ideas what the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage has prepared to situations where peace building and intangible cultural heritage has to be taken into consideration. So there are these principles and modalities which are kind of the guidelines to the world, how we can connect these things. So we now hear a video presentation from Living Heritage Entity and Culture Sector and UNESCO.
Dear participants, hello and greetings from Paris from the UNESCO Secretariat of the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. It is my great pleasure to be able to deliver this video message today on the occasion of this year's ICH seminar on the theme of building peace with intangible cultural heritage, preparedness, response and recovery. Thank you firstly to the organisers of this year's event, the Finnish Folk Music Institute in collaboration with the Kaustinen Folk Music Festival for this kind invitation. My name is Juliette Hopkins and I'm from UNESCO, which is the UN Organisation for Education, Science, Culture and Communication. I'm working in the culture sector of the 2003 Convention Secretariat, where for the last few years I have been leading the Secretariat's work on safeguarding living heritage and emergencies. Today, I will be introducing this theme from the perspective of UNESCO's recent work. I'll firstly give an overview of the Convention and the role of UNESCO in emergency situations and peace building, before presenting the operational principles and modalities for safeguarding intangible cultural heritage, which is the main framework or the key guiding text for our work in this area. So firstly, what is the 2003 Convention? So allow me to begin, for those who may not be so familiar, by recalling some background to the 2003 Convention, which is one of the 6 culture conventions at UNESCO and was the first binding multilateral instrument specifically dedicated to the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage. So the 2003 Convention has 4 primary goals: to safeguard living heritage, to ensure respect for it, to raise awareness for it at local, national and international levels, and to provide for international cooperation and assistance. And this year, in fact, marks the 20th anniversary of the 2003 Convention, which has been a pioneering, standard-setting instrument in the field of heritage. The inception of the Convention gave force to the notion of living heritage, heritage that is not defined solely by objects and monuments, but alive in the expressions, practices, and traditions of communities and individuals. In this way, it brought about a paradigm shift, broadening the concept of heritage beyond built or tangible forms and becoming a key reference for countries around the world in setting up public policies and institutions for safeguarding this heritage in their countries. Today, the Convention counts 181 states parties and 676 elements on the lists and register of the Convention, firmly establishing it as a leader in this field. Yet, as we've seen, much remains to be done. New conflicts, challenges and threats continue to undermine the safeguarding of living heritage around the world, making this year's theme around peace building more urgent than ever. So what is the role of UNESCO in the 2003 Convention in this field? So peace building goes to the core of UNESCO's mission and can be seen even in the opening lines of the Constitution, that since wars begin in the minds of men and women, it is in the minds of men and women that the defences of peace must be constructed. This recognises that peace must be built on more than political and economic ties between states, but requires strong human foundations, deeply rooted in mutual understanding and respect for cultural diversity among all people. Living heritage has a vital role to play in this process. Living heritage embodies the values, traditions, practices that we pass on from generation to generation and which provide a foundation to our identity and well-being. It shapes who we are, what we value, and how we understand and relate to the world around us. And in this way, it contributes to building social cohesion, mutual understanding between and within communities, and respect for cultural diversity. So it is crucial to fostering peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. Within the text of the Convention itself, there are several relevant provisions to our discussions on peace building and emergencies. In particular, in 2015, the governing bodies of the Convention adopted a new chapter of the operational directives on safeguarding intangible cultural heritage and sustainable development at the national level. This chapter includes specific provisions related to the role of intangible cultural heritage for preventing and resolving disputes, restoring peace and security, and achieving lasting peace. At the same time, there were increasing requests from states for the Secretariat to explore in a more strategic and holistic way the relationship between intangible cultural heritage and emergencies. After several years of work on the topic in different emergency contexts and reflections at the intergovernmental level since 2016, it was time to consolidate our knowledge and experience acquired to date and to articulate our approach. An expert meeting was held in 2019 for this purpose, leading to the elaboration of methodological guidance for safeguarding intangible cultural heritage in emergencies, which was adopted by the General Assembly of States Parties to the Convention in 2020. So what are the operational principles and modalities for safeguarding intangible cultural heritage, and why are they important? In a nutshell, they comprise 6 overarching principles complemented by action-oriented modalities organized around 3 main stages of an emergency management cycle, namely preparedness, response, and recovery. They provide guidance to states and other relevant stakeholders on how best to safeguard and engage intangible cultural heritage in a broad range of emergency contexts. They respond to both conflict and disaster situations, recognizing the full complexity of different types of emergencies, and that these different types of emergencies are often interrelated and overlap. They emphasize the dual nature of intangible cultural heritage in emergencies, that emergencies directly threaten the transmission and viability of intangible cultural heritage on the one hand, and can be harnessed as a resource to support preparedness, response, and recovery processes on the other. While we do not have the luxury of time today to go into each principle in full detail, allow me just to highlight a few key points. So first is the central importance of the lives and well-being of communities. If you don't have people, you don't have intangible cultural heritage. So the first priority in any emergency situation is the protection of the lives of the bearers and its communities. Second is community leadership. Communities should be involved in all safeguarding actions, and the same goes in emergency situations. In preparedness, for the preparation of inventories and safeguarding plans. In response, in the identification of immediate needs, and in the recovery stage, in deciding how intangible cultural heritage can best be leveraged. Third, the principles emphasize the dynamic and adaptive nature of intangible cultural heritage. The value given to intangible cultural heritage may in fact evolve or adapt in a crisis situation. We may see some practices revitalize or gain new meaning, and so we cannot necessarily go back to conservation in the pre-disaster state. These principles are complemented by more specific modalities for the 3 main stages of the emergency management cycle. First is the preparedness phase. So how do you prevent and mitigate and prepare yourself for an emergency event? In this regard, UNESCO has been developing capacity building materials on disaster risk reduction, which it has tested in the Philippines and Honduras to help communities integrate intangible cultural heritage into their disaster risk reduction plans. Second is a response phase. So what activities can be undertaken during or immediately after an emergency in order to reduce its impact on individuals and communities and on their intangible cultural heritage? So in this regard, UNESCO has developed a methodology of community-based needs identification that has been adapted and tested in different contexts, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo and in Lebanon with refugee communities in collaboration with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And third is the recovery phase. So how can we mobilize intangible cultural heritage to foster dialogue and reconciliation among communities? This is particularly relevant in the context of displaced persons, and we had a recent interesting project in Ukraine bringing together living heritage into the classroom to strengthen resilience and social cohesion among communities. So I invite you to read the operational principles and modalities in more detail, either in the text of the convention or on our website. But let me sum up by saying there's no one-size-fits-all approach in emergencies, and that these principles should always be adapted to the local context and considerations. We're now seeing the operational principles and modalities applied to different geographical contexts and settings. And after 20 years, we are seeing the evolution of the convention into these new thematic areas, responding to the evolving needs of communities, such as more recently around climate change and refugees. Of course, much work still needs to be done to build awareness around these operational principles and modalities around a broader set of actors, particularly in the emergency management and humanitarian fields. But what they give us is a useful framework for thinking through the different issues at stake when safeguarding intangible cultural heritage and emergencies, in line with the core principles and provisions of the 2003 Convention. So I'll end here, but I'd like to thank the organisers once again for the opportunity to address the participants at this year's seminar, and I hope my presentation has been able to frame the discussions a bit and give you a glimpse of UNESCO's work in this area. I wish you a very successful event. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliette, and thank you, UNESCO Living Heritage Entity. This was kind of the theoretical part, and now we will go to more practical. We go to the communities, and we will just I will give you one good example what we really are facing here, so that we kind of understand the platform, and then we can go on with our great presentations that we have here. But what building peace and a practitioner level, community level collaboration really means, I think we have to remember and see that and highlight it. And it happens, for example, here at the festival all the time. And the kind of the idea of peace building by practice is when a practitioner, a musician meets some other practitioner, a dancer, and they understand their heritage, and they understand their culture, and they will understand the valuing of the heritage, the meaning, and through these kind of connections and collaborations, we will have a better world in the future, and that's kind of the main content of the peace building mission. And here I will give you one example from Kaustinen and then from Spycimierz. Kaustinen and fiddle players, they were last year in Spycimierz with this UNESCO-inscribed flower carpet tradition. So they had very good visit, and we are very happy that the people of Spycimierz and took the Kaustinen people warmly welcomed them to see their tradition and to connect. And now we have the honor of having the people from Poland, from Spycimierz here. And yesterday we had a great flower carpet demonstration at the festival. So I will ask Agnieszka, please. So just a few words to welcome and kind of thank you for the collaboration. Okay, so I will just maybe give the possibility to introduce yourself and maybe tell a little bit about the tradition and the place where you come from.
Okay, I saw in the program that our speech title is Building Bridges. Our bridge is quite big because it takes almost 2,000 kilometers. So we had a long trip, but we are very glad to be here. My colleague is a representative of the Association of Spycimierz that make floral carpets. I am representative of our municipality, and maybe Joanna tell us something about the carpets. and our traditions.
Dzień dobry. Opowiadając o tradycji kwietnych dywanów, musimy zacząć, że od 2021 jesteśmy też właśnie w UNESCO. Nasza tradycja już ma ponad 200 lat. Polega na układaniu kwietnych dywanów podczas procesu wyżywu ciała. To jest najważniejsza rzecz, bo to dotyczy wyżywu ciała.
First of all, I must say that we cultivate our tradition from almost 200 years, and we prepare our carpets of flowers for the Corpus Domini Day, which is the most important day in the whole year for us.
Nasza tradycja należy do sztuki ulotnej, my zbieramy to tylko na kilka godzin. Przygotowania trwają kilka dni, zbieramy kilka dni kwiaty, po czym zbieramy całą drogę kwietnymi dywanami. Przychodzi procesja z księdzem, z monstrancją i sztuka się kończy. Nie ma sztuki.
Our tradition is an art that doesn't take much time because we prepare everything for a few days before we start our preparation before a few days before the event, but it takes only a few hours because when we prepare our carpets, then there is procession with the Blessed Sacrament. The priest walks on the route, and after, I don't know, 5-6 hours, our tradition finishes.
W tradycji zaangażowani są wszyscy mieszkańcy całej parafii.
The most important thing is also that the tradition involves entire families, entire community, families of all generations, from small kids to the senior. And we also collect the flower. We don't buy it, we collect it. And as you help us to prepare our carpet here, our demonstration, it is also nice that it wasn't bought flowers, but you collect it. So the tradition is 100% as we do.
Tak jak już powiedziała, tradycja jest przekazywana z pokolenia na pokolenie i zaangażowani są wszyscy mieszkańcy, od najmniejszych do najstarszych. Tak, nasza przyjaźń zaczęła się z Kaustinem od wejścia do UNESCO. W tamtym roku przedstawiciele z Kaustinem byli w Polsce. Bardzo nam się podobało i też się cieszymy, że mogliśmy odwiedzić Kaustinem.
Our collaboration and maybe friendship, as we can say, started 2 years ago because both tradition from Kaustinen and our tradition entered on the representative list of Intangible Heritage of UNESCO. And last year we had guests from Kaustinen in our town, and now we can be here, which is very nice for us.
Thank you so much. So, on behalf of Finnish Folkmusiikki-instituutti and Kaustinen Folkmusiikki-instituutti and Kaustinen Folkmusiik Festival, so a little gift for you, and then thank you so much for coming and having sharing this experience. The flower club was just amazing yesterday. So one more applause. And then we go on. So we will hear Gutierrez. There, please. You can come. So Diana is from Colombia, she has a vast experience on ICH and peace building and the theme of the day, what it is. And Diana comes from an organization which is accredited to the convention, 2003 convention. And this is how we met a few years ago. But please, Diana Gutierrez.
Buenos días. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here to share my story. And my story is I want to spread the message about how in Colombia we are dancing to live. I'm the director of the Embodying Reconciliation, Cuerpos para la Reconciliación. I'm conducting research in Japan, working with Latin migrant communities, using arts, culture, and dance for peace building. I want to share with you three main messages. The first one is how intangible cultural heritage can save lives, especially the lives of youth that are targeted by war. In Colombia, children are choosing art, dance, culture instead of war. Second is how through their dances, their music, youth is also telling stories about peace, about reconciliation, and also about how to take care of their environment. And third, I want to spread this message to inspire more youth communities to hopefully join the path of art instead of war. But I'm here to talk about one specific project. The project is called the First Intercultural Museum, Bodies for Empathy. In times of emergency, we dance to live. This project was founded by the Ministry of Culture in Colombia in the frame of the COVID emergency. We identified dance groups had many challenges. So the idea was to conduct a research with 5 main groups to identify the main challenges, their strategies, and to create one practical solution to enable the recovery of the dance sector in Colombia. So I will quickly talk about the initiative. I will mention the research groups, what we did, the results, and how we are planning to move forward. So this project is a model for the reactivation of and circulations of the dances in the context of the post-pandemic crisis. And we explore how these 5 different groups in very different areas of Colombia deal with the difficulties, the activities they create within their communities to sustain their creative economy and the collections of inputs for the recovery. We did a general research about 5 different aspects. Generally, information of each group, social aspect, economic, environmental, and the health impact of the COVID within the participants. So as you can imagine, some of the difficulties these groups face was the lack of communication, formation, and circulation of their activities, the absence of having a physical and a material resource to continue their activity, they didn't have like more incentives, social and health problems, and isolation and lack of networks. So the idea of sharing this information was to propose solutions, and by doing so, we identified that the groups were not only staying like still without not dancing, but actually like engaging other cultural heritage, like poetry, storytelling, the use of technology, gastronomy, music, to keep on dancing. They start building like some solidarity, economic strategies such as raffles, prizes, loans, in safe environments, and outdoor practices. And we created like this collective initiative that it's like an online festival. Colombia is a country that dances. We have like popular rhythms such as cumbia, vallenato, salsa, culao, ballet, porro, champeta, merengue. We have plenty of dance groups and companies that represent our dances nationally and internationally. Very rich quality and like diversity. We have a tremendous amount of community participation, celebrations, festivals, also plenty of schools and academies, different styles that go from dance, classical, ballet, contemporary, and also salsa and folk rhythms, and 5 main festivals, one in Bogotá, folk dance festival in San Andres, vallenato legend in Valle del Bar, and one of our main events is the Salsa Festival in Cali. So as you can see, Colombia is a country that dances. But with these groups, what we tried to do in this COVID context was to actually create some pedagogical material in different formats. So we create some video dance proposals. And the interesting about these proposals is that they not only talk about their heritage, but they are also telling stories about peace and about taking care of the environment. We create podcasts, some micro capsules guided with the creativity of the youth participants, photo galleries, and academic webinars that were open to other dance groups within Colombia, but also internationally. But I will quickly show you some of the videos so that you can have a glimpse of the type of young kids are making a strong statement and telling the story about how their moms and grandmothers are not able to continue fishing because when they do it, they found the bodies of their husbands or their relatives. So it's also a statement. And through art, these kids are making and communicating the importance of keeping alive the traditions, the importance of keep on moving despite the difficulties. This is also like some of pedagogical material.
La danza representa nuestra cultura porque es un rescate a nuestras tradiciones. Principalmente que presentamos un fandango, estamos rescatando la fiesta inforraleja, los raspacalabazos, estamos rescatando una tradición que se perdió de muchos tiempos atrás.
Ya que estamos representando tiempos antiguos, estamos tratando de mantener vivencias, creencias, cosas que prácticamente hoy en día se están perdiendo. Entonces estamos tratando de pronto de mantener esa tradición que años atrás hubieron. Uno bailando aprende a ser más tolerante, aprende a convivir más con otras personas que a veces se nos hace complicado y aprendes como que a tener un poco más de expresión, porque a veces eso es muy importante en la hora de bailar.
La danza se relaciona con el medio ambiente, ya que nuestro vestuario es hecho de hoja de plátano. Cuando las hojas están secas, nosotros las tomamos y formamos el vestuario y así vamos ayudando al medio ambiente. Con unas simples hojas de plátano formamos algo muy lindo como es esta agrupación Los Horacines del Monte.
Bueno, gracias a la pandemia hemos tenido algo que nos damos a conocer virtual y a otro por decirlo, a otros pueblos, a otras ciudades, incluso hasta otros países, ya que se va a hacer más fácil por ese medio.
This is another example of how kids are talking about their own culture and using this ICH tool also as a way of building peace, but taking care of the environment as well. This is another group from the Pacific region.
Danza representa mi cultura porque la cultura del negro es ser alegre, es ser feliz y la danza es color, es alegría, es folclore.
Me motivó su forma de mover el cuerpo, sus partes donde viajan, sus historias. También me ha motivado a contarle a las personas las historias de nuestro territorio, sobre lo que está pasando. También me ha ayudado a mantenerme en forma y estar acuerdo.
Yo creo que la danza se relaciona con el medio ambiente, porque el medio ambiente hay que cuidarlo y la danza también hay que cuidarla, porque han llegado otros ritmos, otros bailes al mundo y la danza se va opacando y no hay que dejar que la danza se apague.
La danza también habla sobre nuestras raíces, sobre nuestras plantas, sobre nuestra tierra, sobre lo que queremos que el medio ambiente sepa. Es importante que otras personas conozcan sobre los bailes que realizamos porque algunos tienen muchas historias interesantes, ya que ahí podemos contar lo que pasa en nuestro mundo, sobre nuestros costumbres, sobre nuestros bailes. También es importante que conozcan algunas cosas que no saben.
Es importante que conozcan la cultura chucuana, lo que hacemos nosotros, dinastía.
De dónde provenimos, sobre nuestras ciudades, sobre nuestros bailes, sobre nuestras tradiciones.
Yo creo
I think the powerful thing that happened with this initiative is that we were able to create a network and giving visibility and voice to these groups, especially to youth, talking about their traditions, their dances, their costumes, and all the stories behind. The festival gathered the participation of these 5 research groups, but we launched this big call nationally, and we received more than 55 dance proposals that were created in times of COVID. We also received 25 international groups and the participation of more than 100 cultural managers. We had an audience from very different countries, and I think the most relevant thing is the possibility of creating this networking, circulating of these pedagogical materials in different forms, promoting peace and taking care of the environment. During this process, one of our groups was displaced by paramilitary groups, and it was very interesting how through this networking we were able to create like a fundraising campaign that enabled this group to continue dancing and to give them like the support and come back to their communities. So by doing this network, we were not only safeguarding ICH, but we were also taking care of lives and helping and reaching out and creating solidarity like networks as well. And one of the like main, I guess, learnings or feedback after doing and launching this festival was like this ongoing need of keep on working with capacity building programs, giving youth like a special voice, because in youth we have the possibility to have like creativity, to tell stories, to use technology in different innovative ways. There was like a very demand, interesting idea of continuing the festival, but in different formats, online and face-to-face, giving incentives that it can be like economical, but also just the possibility to have awards at the prizes of the best in innovative proposal for peace, for environment, for creativity. So all of this creates a sense of visibility, of empowerment, and it's very important for kids. And always like this idea of a continuous networking and this continuous intercultural exchange, which makes like very powerful these works. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening to my story about how in Colombia we are dancing to live.
Thank you so much, Diana. And then I asked Miklos Bothi here on stage. So he's the director of Hungarian Heritage House. So we have a great honor also to have Miklos here. And then we will especially hear about his work on folk singing in Ukraine and in other areas actually also, but demonstrations on the Polyphony project, which is an amazing thing. You have to go if you don't know it yet, and then after today you have to check it out and see how it goes. But please, Miklos.
Thank you very much for having me. I think, we got the PPT. Thank you very much. I want to present you the Polyphony project. You will see the website. It's actually the main point and the center point. And in this short time, I just really want to a little bit show how we built up this whole project. So as you see here that we have, I think it's very interesting that we have these different type of main pillars in the project. Firstly, we have a research, and after we have a cinematography, and also we have information technology in the project. You know, I think nowadays is very interesting to combine different type of knowledges in one project. So it's not only enough, I think, to have only one research or researchers or something like this, but I think if you have different background people in one project, this can be some very interesting result. So let's talk about a little bit about the research part. So when we started the project, actually I started alone as a musician. I was interested very much in Ukrainian folk music. I have also a lot of others research in the world, but when I started to be in Ukraine, I was recording few villager singers, some old ladies, and it makes me very interested for this and enthusiastic to the project. And then we started to build up a lot of connection with other Ukrainian researchers. So I found it in different places and invited to the project. And finally, when we started these things, then we also had a connection with the Museum Center of Folk Culture and also Miklos Bothi Academy in Lviv. And also it came from the Hungarian Institute for Musicology of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. And the end of the project, because we worked something like 7 years together, at the end of the project we worked together something like 20, 30 people, professionals in this project. So here you can see that in the map, this is where we worked, so in the 7 years, it's a lot of places. And as you see that we didn't work in that part where is the war now, this Donbass area, because we started in 2013. And 2013, actually, I've been in this Lugansk area before this whole occupation situation. And when we started actually the first bigger fieldwork in 2014, it was already not available, this part. So actually we were very much focusing to that area. And as you see as well, the Carpathian Mountain in the left part, it is also not the focus of the project, because like me as a Hungarian, we have already a lot of research as well in this area, so I was very much interested, which is in the other part of the Carpathian view from the Hungarian perspective. There is another part, I would say, that is a cinematography part, which is very much, so it was a researcher at musicology, so we recording a lot of folk music, but how we record this folk music is a very important question. So then we started to do that, we started to invent a type of way of video techniques and sound techniques, how we can create this database what we intend to do. And you can imagine that, for example, in Ukrainian folk music, it's very common, the folk ensemble, the singing folk ensemble, there is, I don't know, 10 people or singing together, and the texture of the music is very interesting and very complicated. So we had this feeling that, yes, how we should record, how we should archive this whole music. So then we find out that we have to record this music in that way that we have to put in different microphones for every singers to be able to reconstruct and analyzing all the singers, how they doing this and how they created this. So I have a little video to show you how is it like. So not only the research part, but how we can put this kind of whole filming technique and idea. And that was a general idea that we start to have every singer a different microphone, what you see. And also we have to create such a picture quality that is really state of the art, you know. And then we started to invent these whole things, because firstly you should know that all of the fieldwork was the whole idea that we have to go to the villages, Because you could do that, you invite the singers to the capital, for example, in the studio, or there is the approach what we did, that you go in all of the villages. And then you have to bring all of your stuff, all of the cameras, all of the lights and everything, you know. So it was a very, very, complicated question. And then when we arrived to the community, to the village, we tried to record the music in that place where they used to sing. Of course, they sing everywhere. They sing in the field, they sing in the street, and so on. But we try to a little bit show the environment where this music is, you know, and where this music exists. So that was the general idea that we have to somehow capture as well some of the environment. And in the beginning, we started to recording, you know, in houses. Private houses. But after we felt that, you know, sometimes 10 people singing, as you see as well, or 12 or more, it was not enough the place. So mainly we focused to the cultural clubs. This system is absolutely widely organized in Ukraine. And all of the cultural clubs, sometimes in the sport rooms and so on, as you see here now. But mainly we focused to recording in a cultural club because it was enough places and you know, to show it. But also, because of this, look at this, for example, we also a little bit bring, like visually, this whole area and whole atmosphere looks like. So I think it was very interesting. So that was generally this type of cinematographic approach. And I will not let you show it because we recorded, I will show you in the end, we recorded something like 150 villages, so we have a lot of such recordings. But yes, one more thing I want to mention that, and then we had the idea that we have lots of such recordings, so actually we published around now 2,000 videos. Such a quality, and these videos are based in YouTube. So it was a decision in the project at the very beginning that we have to upload everything to the YouTube to have in this platform to be able to, you know, to have more potential to people meet with this whole material. Actually, just talking about the numbers, some of the videos is over 1 million views, but it's quite often 100,000 views as well in the database. So I think it was a very interesting way to a little bit communicate or about the dissemination of this music and of this photo. Okay. Let's move on. Just shortly about the information technology. This is the third pillar, what we said, that because you know that was a question that okay, how we can present this whole amount of information. You know, this is all the time a problem if you're recording a lot of folk songs and information, how you organize it and how you publish it. This is a very, very important question. And then we started to involve IT team, which was absolutely not an easy question because, you know, folk music is absolutely not a mainstream topic, so it has no big funds. So, you know, so you couldn't really find such IT professionals who saying that, yes, I will work with you, and they are very, very high quality, you know, professionals. So, and we started to search, and finally we find an absolutely great team, and we started to work together. And we have this type of system, this NoSQL search engine system, which is very interesting that it's divided the front end, so the website, you can create multiple websites, and in the background there is a search engine which is very, very quick and very responsible. So all these things all this information was implemented in such a IT technology. Just a few things about the website. You will see, I think, at the end I will show you again the website. This is how it looks like the website on part. Of course, you can see this map view, but for example, so you can search for the first line of the song, or the location of the song, but you have also have the genre, which was created with Ukrainian professionals, this whole framework, the genre framework. And for example, if you are interested for carol songs, then you are searching for calendar and ritual songs, carols, and inside the carols there is also different types of traditions. For example, carols for the beekeepers, it's also very interesting Ukrainian generation and also in other parts. Or melang or different type of tradition, you can find it. You can also search for ethnographical regions, and we have also such a browsing options that themes and motifs. So for example, if you want to find a love song or unfortunate fate song or a song about the war or something like this, so I think it's a multiple way to approach. And as you see that all of the songs what we represent, there is in the website. So you just type the URL, and in the browser you have this multiple player, where you can actually listen, you can watch the videos, which is in the YouTube, but under it you can choose the different lines which you want to listen. So actually you really can analyze all of the singers. And I think it's very interesting that if you're falling in love with one of the singers, they say, yeah, I like it very much, you can really analyze. And then, if you learn it, you can turn off her, for example, and you can sing the song, creating kind of virtual communities, you know, and connecting times and traditions. Okay, in the end, because I think I'm finished now. In the end, I have two videos for you. The first video is showing this type of filming techniques, how we want to a little bit touch this whole tradition. Now I will show you one Carol movie. No, I want to show it to you. So the first is about the Christmas period, and this is how we also was thinking that how to actually represent this whole idea. And the second video will be about the promote movies when we first time opened the website. We create a promotion movie, and the whole idea was that we asked the ladies, that the old singers, you know, around 8 years old ladies, that what do you know about the internet? And we have multiple different answers, and that was actually the opening promoting videos of the website. So let's see first this Christmas tradition movie, and then just like this. Because it was here, just like I wanted.
прийшов на землю, з неба злодіка. Христос родився, Христа вітаймо, церковці наші, його віддаймо. Я коліничка, піду святій Тройці, поклін віддати Ісусу Христу, Господу Богу, благословеним нас у дорогу. Ми йдемо в гори, людям сказати, що Вифлеємі там поживати. Сина вродила, благословила, та й помолилась Господу Богу, Божому Дому, Різдву Святому, Ісусу Христу. Ісусу Христу, Києві пречиський Києві Марії, щоби вела нас менну дорогу, щоби вернулись менно додому.
Right? And the second video is about these promotional things.
Інтернет? Я його не знаю, не хочу. Я його не знаю, не бачив, то інтернет тільки по ньому не міг робити. Чули, що інтернет є. Ну я ж як це вони звуться, Господи. От голова вже знає. Інтернет. Ну оці як вони. Як ці коробки звуться? Що ці баби знають? То заходять в інтернет, заходити треба із цього, як вони звуться. Ну то є інтернет, а то є цей. Є планшет, а то ще якось інше зветься, що тобі що така коробка, як воно зветься? Як воно зветься? Комп'ютер. Треба ще щось інше, що тоді ти праця на них. Комп'ютери? Ну а що? Комп'ютери. Розкладається, складається і там все комп'ютери. Тоді вже треба з нього заходити в інтернет, так? Так. Ну то це. А показує все, як співають. Якісь ігри грають, і тракторі, і машини показують все, то ж на що дивиться. Ви знайдіть нашу сторінку, там ми вже, що, ми там, я не знаю, скільки нас вже там. А яка наша сторінка? Оксани треба питати. Там ми вже є по всій Україні. Ми зайняли перше місце по Україні, не забувайте. Телевізори пускають, навіть мені було 80 років, та й там теж є. Що від початку до кінця, як я заходила, народа скільки було, як мене зустрічали, як ці мої дівчата співали, ансамбль, йде, другий ансамбль, Горлиця, всі мене зустрічали, з району, з області. Що там чому? Та й що як якась жінки, я не знаю, а якісь анекдоти казала по такій смішній по телевізору чи по цьому інтернеті, ти таке ж інтересно подивитися, так? Ну так, у нас, я ж кажу, перше місце Орлівка тримає скрізь. Перше місце по Україні. Нам дали дипломи, похвальні, а ми скрізь, де ми лиш не були? Ми були, де не були, то грамота. І скрізь ми приносимо перше місце, а наша Орлівка не вірить. Приїжджає з району, привозять, показують, дивіться, бачите, люди добрі, зробили концерт, аж тоді повірили. Не вірять, що це бабіше можу щось заробити. Хоч ми вже й старенькі люди, може колись вже й помираємо, ми вже цього чекаємо. Але бажаємо молодим і хочемо, щоб молоді, всі люди, які є на білому світі, щоб співали ці наші українські пісні. Вчили, вивчали, бо вони дуже гарні. І дуже вас просимо, слухайте ці пісні і вивчайте, і співайте ви, дай Боже вам віка, здоров'я, довголіття, щоб вам було добре, так як нам зараз. Ой, летіла зажуленька понад круті гори вибирала, пшениченько лежала полону вибирала, пшениченько лежала полону.
Here is the website, please visit it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miklos. Now we have had two great examples. ICH, this building, different projects and different approaches. We will be talking about these things after the lunch break. So now it's the lunch break and we will serve borscht soup in the cafeteria. It's 10 euros and there's some information about this Ukrainian UNESCO inscribed element also. And I will just ask Pirjo and Aljona here to say good appetite to all. We will be very brief. Just I have to thank Kaustinen Marta and then the Ukrainian community in Kaustinen. We have been collaborating a lot, trying to make visible the great Ukrainian traditions. And here we can really now make it happen, and this is a great privilege to us. So just very briefly, we are a little bit tight on schedule. We will begin 13:10. From here there will be the Hudaki village band, but we have about 45 minutes to have the lunch, so I think that will be enough. Just, yes.
Tervetuloa maistamaan ukrainalaista borskeittoa. Täällä on meillä aito ukrainalainen emäntä Alona Kerttula. Haluaisin kyllä sanoa kiitokset Unkarille. Tämä oli aivan liikuttava tämä äskeinen esitys. Vähän puheen kanssa on vaikeuksia.
So welcome for the lunch and special thanks for this last presentation. It's hard to say these welcoming words after this presentation, but we have Aljona Kerttula and Pirjo Palosari-Pettilä, the hosts of the lunch. So let's have the lunch there and bon appetit. Seminar. Next speaker will be Yuru Bukovynets, and but before this speech, we will hear a great band from Ukraine about a short presentation of the living folk music here and now. So, please, Hudaki Village Band. Thank you so much, Hudaki Village Band. Let's give another applause.
And with Yuri, we had a wonderful conversation just 2 weeks ago about the band and his ideas about peace in his work. And he has also promised to share these ideas with us all. So please, Yuru Bukovynets. Yes.
Thank you, Matti. Thank you, everybody, for this opportunity to speak out about our experience during wartime. We are a band from Ukraine, so I'm actually not theoric than a practitioner, and maybe I must introduce myself. I'm Ukrainian by choice, but not born in Ukraine. Excuse my English, it's not my favorite language. So I am born in Vienna in Austria, but about almost 30 years ago I chose to live in Ukraine and met these musicians in the village in the Carpathians, which is in the very western part, which is of Ukraine, which is actually a big chance for us to be in the western part without rockets and without the direct impacts of the war. So another point of introduction I would like to make, to say it's about the war and the question of culture and cultural heritage in war. So we must be aware that the war between Russia and Ukraine did not start in 2022. It started a long time ago, really long time, maybe 300 years. This is what most Ukrainian people are aware about, but not most of people of the international community, of course. And this question is, it's a war of cultures. And what you are aware as people who are reading newspapers and reading some analysis, of course, that it goes about the annihilation, about the destruction of culture of Ukraine now in this war, during this war, where it was now accelerated and accentuated, but this tendency is going on for centuries. So this belong in this question of culture. Of course, it goes about the expression of local identity and what is in our mind as local musicians, that we must strengthen the self-consciousness and the reconnaissance of local identity to strengthen resilience of Ukrainian society and civil society. And this question, this is not only the question of international community, it's also a question internal in Ukraine, that due to suppression during many centuries, also especially during Soviet Union period, where local traditions were destructed systematically, and the self-awareness in Ukraine also must raise that there are a lot of strong local identities which must be preserved. In this case, I very like the work of Miklos, who is here, because he did really great work, and it's not for me as also a newcomer in Ukraine for 30 years actually, but it's not only by chance that people from abroad must do this work. And I think here, when we can say something about the role of international stakeholders, that we must take part in strengthen the self-consciousness that these local identities must get stronger, because they have been destructed systematically during these centuries, during Soviet Union, but also by commercial mass media in the last 30 years of independent Ukraine. So actually, we have a renaissance, beginning of self-awareness about local identity, but it's still very weak, and we have no structures also. So as I can give our example as a band, we perform 95% abroad. We have almost no possibility to perform in Ukraine, because it's not because people don't like what we do, they love it, and the reaction of public is very great in Ukraine. It's even better than abroad. But we have no stakeholders, we have no organizations, we have no structures who are supporting. And this is a part of this cultural war, what is brought inside Ukrainian society, that is this complex of minority, that local culture is inferior to something American or something of commercial culture. And in this is also a part of struggle to strengthen resilience of Ukrainian people. And last point I will say, actually more concrete, what we are feeling during this war period, that we have, in Ukraine we have also, yes, I didn't speak about this, we have we had a big problem, a systematical lack of confidence between population in West and Eastern Ukraine. And this lack of confidence was also a preparation of the actual war. It was systematically raised when I went to Crimea some years ago, or to Eastern Ukraine. People were afraid of Western Ukrainian people. They think these banderists will shoot them, and there was no acceptance between people from East and West, East and West. And now, during the war, we often perform abroad, for example, in Germany, Switzerland, everywhere we meet refugees, and most of these refugees, Ukrainian refugees, are from eastern part of Ukraine. And listening our concerts, they are discovering this culture of Western Ukraine. They don't know nothing about it. They have no idea about it. And the opposite, in Western Ukraine, there are a lot of prejudices about people of the eastern part of Ukraine, who have no culture, maybe who are people of Donbass. They call them Downbass, or that was in the last years. Now it's getting better, because the mixture, because of these many refugees come, and people are finally meeting. And these meetings also should be strengthened by cultural. I think these cultural roots in this period are really very important to get in confidence, but because people are feeling that they have the same vibrations, that they can share, even when the music is different. Our music is very different from music from central or eastern part of Ukraine, completely almost different. And they have even problems to understand what we sing, because the dialect is very different, but they love it. And we love also this music from central part, the polyphony, what Miklos told you about, but it's really different. So I think this is the main thing I wanted to say. I don't know if my time is finished. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Yuri. Yes, very, very important to have this opportunity to really think from the personal side, like what's the situation now in different parts of the world, in these different occupations that are very, very familiar to us, like as a musician. So I think we have a lot of things to think from this speech. But thank you, Yuri. And now we have a little bit from another approach. Our last speaker is Oskari Eronen, Head of Asia, CMI Martti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation. Please. And we also have talked with Oskari, and Oskari doesn't have that much background in cultures, but this is actually the point, so that now we see a kind of approach from a person who doesn't work on the culture field, but actually with the peace reconciliation field. And I think it is very interesting to see your approach, and maybe in the coming panel discussion we can learn something new. But Oskari Eronen.
Kiitos. Thank you, Matti. Thanks for having me here. Thank you for the invitation. It's really an honor and pleasure to be contributing to this day's seminar and be again here in Kaustinen. I come from indeed a different profession. That's profession of peace mediators. I've been in the field of international conflicts, peace and security for nearly 20 years. Worked shortly in the defense, a longer time in international diplomacy, including for the Finnish Foreign Affairs, and now 10 years in this organization called CMI Martti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation. We are a so-called independent peacemaking organization founded by former president of Finland, Martti Ahtisaari, right after stepping down from office. He decided to do something else than typical international offices and form his own organization to support that mission. What we do is dialogue, political dialogue, social dialogues, support to peace processes, conflict resolution and prevention, often related to official structures and peace processes, but on the more informal side, trying to complement the highest tables where politicians meet and sign eventually, hopefully, peace agreements. So this is what we do, typically convening people to discuss about their conflicts and the potential road towards peace. I'm afraid that my presentation might be leaning towards where we started this morning, so more to the political frameworks and policy issues, but trying to be somewhat concrete and pragmatic about it. Let me start from conflicts. As we heard already in the UNESCO presentation, the number of conflicts and the sheer size of suffering is highly and steeply increased globally. There are more wars and more victims and more suffering, more problems to be solved. There are many causes to conflicts at different levels in different spheres of life. Definitely also the political armed conflict is most often related to cultures, identities, history, languages, etc. So it's not, the politics cannot be disassociated. It's not separate from culture, identities, histories, languages, heritage, etc. Just look at the conflict in and around Ukraine, which many of you have today, earlier presenters have mentioned and talked about. How Russian leadership motivated or explained the latest massive aggression was an interpretation of what Russia is and what Ukraine isn't. It's obviously wrong, and we've seen testimonies of that today. But it's part of the political framework. On the other hand, the strength of Ukraine in this war has really been its civil society. Then, on top of the civil action and the spirit coming together as a nation, the political leadership in that country has been able to mobilize the country and its resources further and gain the international support. We also see a front of religious conflict in and around Ukraine in the Orthodox Church. But conflicts are also dynamic. And this is something as a characteristics that links to the agenda of intangible cultural heritage. So conflicts change the patterns of life, of societies, practices, norms, and the culture, which is not only about destroying the old patterns or consolidating patterns and practices and culture in response to the threat emanating from conflict. It's also transformatory. So conflicts transform societies, cultures, heritage, and sometimes also in ways that could be considered positive. Of course, the bottom line, the most important question is if it's positive or not to the very community in question. I give a few examples. First, looking at Myanmar, formerly known as Burma in Southeast Asia. There, the popular uprising and popular resistance in response to the military takeover, coup d'etat 2 years ago, really has transformed the newer generations and the society, many segments of the society, combining the will and power and the energies of the youth, working class, academics, women, ethnic minorities and groups. And by effect of these factors, we see quite radical changes, for example, in gender roles. The young women are the spearhead of the democratic movement and resistance to the military rule. Also, it has transformed, or it's on the way of transforming. The end result is not yet clear. Ethnic relations. So the majority ethnicity, those in the majority ethnicity in favor of democracy and change in the country start to now understand better the earlier phases of suffering and violence against the ethnic minorities, the other groups, which brings now them together on a common cause of change in the country. Another example could be Afghanistan, where we see very sad relapse of the Taliban going back to the ways they ruled the country in the 1990s. On the other hand, it's clear that the situation otherwise is not as it was in the 90s. The civil society, communities, women's networks and organizations, even ethnic, religious, tribal leaders networks are not the same as they were in the 1990s. There's much more will, there's much more capacity, energy, and determination to oppose and demand for their rights and opportunities in the country. This then leads me to the sort of second segment of my presentation. So what brings different actors and fields together around the ICH agenda on conflict and peace? I think we should all be looking quite in long term and throughout the so-called conflict cycle, or in other words, conflict prevention, conflict resolution, and peace building. So what happens before, during, and after open violent conflict. And this is not only about what brings us together, what unites the agendas, so to speak, where I come from and where the ICH people come from, is the idea and conviction that it's not only about preservation or protection, it's much about active agency, participation, having one's voice exercised and heard. Hence, it cannot be top-down, at least not only. There's been lots of attention in the past few years to something called nexus. This is now the policy jargon I'm using. It really means trying to increase the coherence and cooperation between humanitarian assistance, development cooperation, and peace efforts, to have a bigger effect when working better together. I think this is something where we just increase the focus on participation and prevention. However, we are not very far, I would say. We are almost taking first steps of recognizing the agenda of intangible cultural heritage. But this is a positive opportunity to pick up and improve. I think it could be the next thematic push. In the past 15-20 years, in the peace building and peacemaking field, we've had maybe first the thematic and normative push to women's inclusion, so the women, peace and security, then youth, peace and security. In the past years, increasingly climate change and environment in relation to peace and security. Very recently, persons with disabilities. And I believe that we should be looking at the cultural heritage in the same fashion, which requires quite a lot of systematic and concentrated work on these matters. And maybe that's something that the panel can discuss as well. I think this is a message I'll bring home to my own organization, to my colleagues, that we do need to learn quite quickly. Really what brought me also here, it's personally a day of learning and hearing others, taking many notes, and looking forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, we will continue with the panel. So Miklos and Diana, please come here. And Yuri, he had some trouble with the sound check timing, so we might get Yuri, but we are, I think, enough. Just Miklos, Oskari, and Diana. And please have a seat. You can choose, but not the one over there, so that we will be here. So, first question will be, what have you learned today, or some reflections on the topics that we have heard? And Miklos, please, if you could start.
Okay, hello, yes, working. I think for me, it was very interesting what Yuri said before, because you see that our general project, how we worked, was absolute before the war. So our last expedition was around the COVID period. And because of the war, and so I also have some other jobs and so on, but altogether we couldn't go in to have expedition in the field. In Ukraine. So what is Yuri was telling, this is something very interesting for me, because we see that the whole society is changing now because of the war. So what he said, that this is really much, you can touch this kind of opposition between the east and the west part of Ukraine. And now what he's saying, that this, because of the inner immigration in the countries, it's bringing the people together. And of course, because of depression and so on. And somehow this is what we see as well, that it's just really people, if they have such a tension, then this is what I feel, that the people are just getting really focusing to the tradition as well. So if you have such a tension and such a situation what the Ukrainian has now, I feel that the young generation just really want to focusing where we are come from, what is our roots. And then is the question of what kind of material we have, what they can read, what they can watch it, and what does it have. And I think this was it was interesting that because of the full situation, when we started this whole work, we were never thought that it will be any kind of war or something. So actually I had this experience that we have a lot of, I'm from Hungary, we have a lot of stories from parents, grandparents, that the country was closed, you couldn't really traveling and anything. And my generation already had this experience that we traveled the whole world through, and this was absolutely normal. And now I have this feeling that everything is closing now, which is show us, I think, the seriousness what's going on now, and this is also showing that people are getting again divided very much. So this is what I can say now. Thank you.
I think, like for me, something that really calls my attention is what unites us, because I think like we have very different approaches, and maybe now like our look it's really in the Ukrainian-Russian war, but actually when we think about conflict in a more like general way, there's also possibilities, and I really like that approach, no? Like how can conflict transform societies, people, communities, in our case ICH, and it's really interesting this idea of how even like in folk traditions, in music, in dance, we are also inscribing new meanings. We are safeguarding, but also our songs, our dances can also speak about what's going on, no? What's the conflict, but not only staying in like the negative or in the past, but also like being a channel for other pathways that can be conflict resolution, mediation, creativity, and I think that's very powerful for any kind of conflict and mediation.
No? I didn't do it. Yeah? Yeah, it works. Good. There are so many things to comment, and first of all, thank you for very both insightful and inspiring presentations, colleagues. Maybe I have more questions in mind than a lot of direct comments. And the principal question is, what are the safe and useful ways to support sort of locally arising and bottom-up approach of harnessing positively cultural heritage for peace building? So, and do you see risks therein to be doing in such manner that would be counterproductive? And I think in that regard, what you said about research, what was mentioned by several presenters today about research and collecting information, creating a common knowledge base is extremely important. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. So now we have a good question. Miklos, Diana.
Because like in the core of the ICH is this idea of it is shared by communities, and to be shared it has to have like a powerful meaning. And I do believe that also like to safeguard this community and meaning also involves in many cases the possibility of dealing with people and healing individuals and healing communities, because if we cannot share a common ground, then it's very difficult to safeguard a tradition, no? So I think there's like a double angle of ICH as a tool itself, but also as a goal. And this tool, as I was mentioning, can bring possibilities if it involves like a shared, responsible way of involving different stakeholders. Because when we talk about a practice or a community, it's very important to really involve all the stakeholders, kids, youth, of course, like local leaders, and they all have very different angles and approach and understanding of their own tradition. So I do believe like it's important to consider all the actors, and in this dialogue there are also tensions and are risks, like life itself. And a responsible way of conducting research is, I think, the possibility of giving space and voices to everyone in this process.
Yes, very interesting question, and I think I have firstly a little bit philosophical answer from the distance. I think this whole human life, we are in the unlimited space in the human perspective and unlimited time in human perspective, and this is when the people start his life, that he bring this four wall and he say this unlimited space, this space is my home, you know. This is why the building heritage is a key question. And the unlimited time is the same, you have the same feeling that something you miss in this and you will just disappear in this unlimited time. So the rituals is very similar like in the space, the walls. The rituals, when you are doing things regularly, every Sunday, every Monday, for example, Christmas or St. John's Eve and whatever, these rituals actually settling the human mind and everything in the life. And then comes the ICH, I think, here, because what kind of building heritage you have, what kind of rituals you have, what kind of songs and everything. So this is how I think the human mind settling. And here comes the quality question and everything, that do we have a common sense with these meanings, you know, with the songs and the rituals and everything. And if we have this, then we have the feelings that some stable is here, some stable it is arriving in our life. And especially, I think, and this is why I reconnect my previous part, what I'm said, that this is why is it coming in such a tension, be very important, the traditions, because actually this gives you the feeling that you have some stability in your life, you know. So I think this is, for me, the philosophical background of this whole things.
Thank you. Yes, it is a very, very good question. I think from our perspective and with the experience working with ICH, I think this is kind of the key question of everything that if and what intangible cultural heritage, the concept, what it tries to kind of be, that the approach goes so that if you really want to have an impact, you have to go through the communities. You can, if you do it otherwise, you won't go to the end in a way. It's not going to be kind of the end goal. But at the same time, when you give the authority to the communities to define their own culture and their values and kind of idea of safeguarding and transmitting, in that process, of course, it includes a lot of risks from, if you think it from the top, kind of from the other approach. So it's just it's like when you take care of a child, it would be on the other hand, it would be better, you know everything better than the child, but if you tell always the things to do, the child will never grow to be an own person. So I think this is kind of the community approach idea here, that if you really want to go to deep down to the roots, then the community is the only way. And it includes risks, of course, like life, like Diana said. But another thing now, Oskari, you mentioned about the future of your foundation, that you will now take the intangible cultural heritage to to be part of your actions maybe in the future. So actually the next question was about this thing that we, I think, understand here, the culture people or people who work with intangible cultural heritage, folk music, folk arts. We know what values and what meanings these cultures have. But especially in the Western world, it is neglected in many cases. So kind of the understanding how big societal impact culture has. And especially when we talk about now this concept of UNESCO or the intangible cultural heritage concept and everything that it includes, how could we make this more visible in the peace building and understanding about the diplomatic politics of the world? How could we kind of translate the language of music to the world? Do you have any ideas kind of on behalf or from this what we have learned today here? And Oskari, please. Or you can just.
So I think this is the moment now.
I see there's always a challenge with translation, and yeah, you might send a message that is understood in a certain way. The question of how to harness and how to expand and how to translate is crucial. And well, since you already pointed out or made reference to the official diplomacy and international framework and organizations, I think there CMI is one of the actors in this field as a practitioner in connection to those who set policy. And as a wider field, we would have as a next step a sizable task, first to understand, become better aware, and then find out the ways to operationalize. Luckily, we don't have to start from the scratch, because as said, we've had these waves, subsequent waves of picking up on several so-called thematic areas that may be not a good term here. Nevertheless, we can learn of how we started integrating to conflict analysis, planning of our work, to dialogue and negotiations frameworks, including eventually to the agendas, the issues of environment or youth. I think that could be the path here as well. That would need to start somehow from collecting current good practice, understanding what works, what are the lessons out there in the field. But I'm personally very interested in this already by the opportunity of participating here today, and as said, as an individual in a community of practice, start putting the message forward.
Thank you, Diana. Miklos.
I think I'm not true convinced that there's an absolute power about culture and art in mediation, in peace building, and that we should definitely have a more important role in in the approach of how we understand mediation. But I think it's always tricky, because when we talk about intangible, it's hard to measure that in terms of numbers, in terms of legal agreements, in terms of quantitative data. But it's also this quality of intangible that makes it so powerful. It talks about the core values of humanity, the core values of nations, of our identities, the heart of each country. And I think in this exchange with other cultures, with the other ways of moving, other ways of listening, other ways of breathing, if we are able to respect that, it's an absolutely powerful mediation tool. And that's on my opinion, really a pathway to enhance cultural understanding, cultural diversity, and it's a powerful like window towards any kind of conflict resolution.
So firstly, I want to emphasize that I absolutely, yes, believe what you said, all of you, that culture is the way how we can interact and connect, of course. But now I wanted to say something, also the tricky part of the things, because, you know, just stick in the music part, folk music part. I think all of the art question is something like an imaginary container, which is collecting meanings between people and meanings between one person and so on. And what is interesting, that a lot of people thinking that folk music is something static, meanings, things, and that's it. But folk music is like this container all the time changing what is inside, these meanings and all of these symbolical things. And this is where the tricky part comes, because, for example, Ukrainian folk music, the youngsters before war, means much less. After coming the war, and the whole folk music, the text and everything has absolutely totally new meanings. This is one of the things which is showing that how dynamic is actually this whole process is. The second thing is what I want to say, that after this postmodern era, I mean in this postmodern era that we have so many different music next to each other, I think music is very much closer like the languages. So I speak Hungarian, I speak other, I don't know, 3 languages more, but that's it. I don't understand a lot of other languages. And also the music has the language. And the language is that you understand the whole structure, and there is meanings for you, for the music. And that is where is the limitation, that I see some music and I just hear that, yeah, it sounds interesting and so on, but I have no meanings for it. You understand? And this is where is it coming tricky, that how to connect to these things. So we all the time need some kind of narratives. We all the time need some stories, or especially, I think, important, the common project, when you are doing with other people together something, and in the end you have success. This gives kind of trust and common meaning, which is absolutely possible to do. But never forget that in the human shelf, or the human mind shelf, is just limited spaces. So for normal people who are not musician, maybe he can, in his head, can be maybe 50, 100 songs, and that's it. So you understand? So there is a limitation to communicate via culture as well. So this is only one part, and this is an interesting question, how you can extend and how you can give narratives and how you can give different type of meanings in this container.
Thank you. That was, yeah, very, very interesting. And also, I think this is the case, or what you see very clearly when you talk about professional folk music, for example, and then kind of this community-based folk music practitioner side. And this new idea of intangible cultural heritage actually includes also the professional side of it. And it's kind of regarded as a community with these meanings and narratives, and they are not the same as, they are not like from one village, but they are maybe from the beer tent of Kaustinen. And that's a community, it's like a modern or not that old community, but it is, you can use the kind of the same language and same approach, and you can safeguard it as at the same way. But this is, I think, very important to understand also whenever we want to implement the ideas of the convention and the intangible cultural heritage, that it's not only the kind of the village music or the kind of the Kaustinen, you have to have this folk costume to kind of go to this traditional idea or the or so on. But it actually, it is everything. It is, and that's why it's so powerful also, that you can, it's not like folk music, but it's like everything. It's like human life in a way, just the cultural expressions and so on. Just I think 2 times I've heard today that people have been very positive about youth. So I will ask all of you that what do you think that will happen in the future on this field? When you look at the students, or if you have seen here at the festival, the youngsters, or or in your own families, wherever, but when you think about culture and how we express ourselves in a global manner, culturally, so how do you see the situation? Miklos, or you can just choose.
Okay, not an easy question. You see, in Hungarian perspective, we see that if I just continue what I said before, that this whole meanings is changing. So it's so interesting that culture connect people and also culture divide people, because the older generation, he has the own meaning of this music or dances or everything, and they really want that the young generation also have the same meaning for it. But it just never will be like this, you know, because you know why. And this makes also this dividing as well. And for me, I all the time, if I see it, because my job is like I see really in the umbrella organization, the whole Hungarian scene, is all the time I have the mixed feeling that one time I'm very positive because a lot of young generation starting the music and so on, but I also see the divideness between the generation. And I think what is the power of the intangible cultural heritage, that is crossing generations, because you know that this pop music and everything, which is absolutely good and a lot of innovation and very interesting things, but the problem is that these trends, this constantly new band and new music, and what I'm said that people might have only 50 songs in the whole life or 100, I don't know. And this whole trend is like this, that you have in the pop music one band or two or three which you like, and those songs you know, and your brother who is, I don't know, 4 years younger, he has absolutely another song in his head with new bands and so on, and this is dividing people. And this is the power of folk music, for example, and folk dances, that it's connecting generation. You just have to go in Kaustinen Festival and you will immediately see that how much power it has. But still there is the debate between generation about the same music, how to interpret, how to understand and so on, and this gives this time kind of very interesting oscillation, so to say. And so I would say that we have to work on it to connect people, and this is what I would say for cultural professionals, that we, if you have a little project, you have your very strong vision what to do, and you do it, you know. You are doing with 3, 4, 5 person together. But if you're working hundreds of people or thousands of people like me do, and some of you also do, then you have to accept a lot of different type of vision. And this is something very complex, because you need a lot of empathy and you need a lot of relaxed energy and so on. But this is how we have to a little bit calibrate the society, that just bring people together and have some common project and common understanding. And this is what we can do. But, you know, I also feel that whatever you're doing, whatever the cultural professional doing, if there is coming such a things like war or something, everything is ruining. So I'm really, I mean, not everything, it's more complex, but you understand that it's such a power, it's changing so much that it's just, you just watching and see what is happening.
For me, there are 2 key words to complement. It's really this idea of connection, but how these connections are dynamic, and they're really different between like the stakeholders and generations. And I think there should be space for that, no? Like, we can connect to our tradition in different ways. For kids can have like a special meaning, and of course younger generation now use lots of tools that older generations do, like not use, no? Like, we are now in the era of artificial intelligence and how to connect with our culture through digital inventories or technology, and this gives possibilities and limitations, but it's the tool of new generations. And that's also a possibility, no? As long as it creates connection, innovation, and has like a meaning. But I also feel like this intergenerational dialogue, it's unique and quite special of ICH, because it connects different generations, and that's what makes unique really like the practice that is shared and transmitted from generation to generation. Of course, it's not stable. We cannot talk now about authentic or not, or a good or bad way of doing it. But as long as we understand that there's like this, like kind of strong immaterial force that unites us, like each stakeholder, participant can give its own meaning and relation and connection to it as well.
Not surprisingly, I would go along the same lines, observing same trends. So globalization of information opportunities, platforms, techniques, which are becoming increasingly important for movements, political movements of different kinds. That's something that we observe in our work in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia. It's by and large the youth that are at the forefront of reinventing what it means to be a political movement, call for change, but then interestingly combining some of the old traditions and ways, which is definitely intergenerational wisdom and cooperation. So I would look hopefully into that sort of both localization and globalization at the same time that the youth can do. A concrete example I could draw from own observations and mind from Myanmar again. The more experienced women in the resistance, popular resistance against the military rule, have made good use of a local belief that men cannot pass under women's clothing. So the resistance has put to dry out their clothes in the streets, above the street level, between buildings, which has effectively prevented the military and the riot police to patrol that street, because going on beneath the women's clothing would be reducing their masculinity, according to the local habits and belief. Then it's the younger generation who has made all the TikTok and Facebook and Instagram use of that as a political campaign, locally, regionally, and internationally. So, but it's a question of which is deeper to the ICH agenda of how to combine preservation and safeguarding and the local, but then to try to find the common ground between specificities, which means a certain level of integration and exchange, and not being afraid of that integration and exchange, which is the essence of making peace. So we make peace based on our differences, but trying to find a common ground.
Thank you. Yes, this is very nice, very nice. Very many thoughts. Maybe now, before the last question, I will ask if anybody in the audience wants to ask something to any one of the panelists. We will have the festival there, so we won't talk too long, just for nothing. So if nothing there is, then we go on to the last question. Yes, please, here's the mic.
I would say, because I was maybe a little bit negative, and this is why you have this feeling that. So I think, I think. Firstly, lot of young generation interested for this topic, what we are talking about. So I think this is, it shows something very powerful things. The second thing is what we have to focus in such a time that we have to make a good quality job. which sounds a little bit, poetic. But we understand, I think, what I'm saying, that we have to really focus into this, to this point, because I think this is what gathered the people together. So I'm generally optimistic. Just this circumstance is not really, So I would say this, that I think the next generation, and what we see also in Hungary, and we talk with Matti as well, that unbelievable lot of new generation is interested for these things, and I think in our perspective it is something absolutely a bright future in that way.
Oskari, you want to tell us something about the future? What?
I think it takes me back to the first question, and it is this idea of how in conflict there's also the possibility that it emerges like opportunities of transforming realities, transforming the way we connect with, in this case, our music, our festival, our practice, our family. And nowadays the world is more connected, and I think this is a clear example, an exchange of how we are dealing or thinking about conflict, thinking about peace, thinking about music, dance, which is very different from different corners of the world, but from like different humans. No, we have a different understanding of life, and in this exchange there's always the possibility of understanding, of mutual cooperation, of dialogue, and we are more interconnected in that way than ever. And I also believe and feel, and having experienced this festival, that there's a huge potential in new generations in understanding and integrating like the things that they want and care about their traditions with the new tools and the new problematics and challenges of the daily life.
I cannot add any more wisdom to what was already said by Diana and Miklos. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions? Oh, there is one. We have the microphone here, so just a second and...
Really nice.
Just in case.
Just in case, and for the streaming, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Annina Ylikoski, and I work for the Ostrobotnian Children's Culture Network, BARC, where we work quite a lot with children and youth and heritage in terms of in education. I was thinking this, how do you see the digital part in the ICH world, especially when we looked at the Ukrainian ladies, they had a very interesting take on it, but how do you see the digital possibilities to connect through intangible heritage?
Hard parts or challenges in the work?
Or is it a big possibility with the digital world? Is it easier to connect?
Is it to whom? For one?
I don't know. Do you have any experience or example of that?
I can, sorry, because we have actually our project based very much in the digitalization and all of this interpretation. Yes. So generally speaking, we see this thing that I starting in that point that we see that actually we have lack of professionals compared to how many people are interested for traditional music, dance, and so on. So that was the point when we decided to creating digital databases and educational platforms and so on, because we felt that actually we have to coming in this field. Comparing to the pop music, for example, I don't have any numbers, but I think I wouldn't say something wrong if I would say that 50-60% of the education of pop music is something going in with the YouTube and something like this. So it's very, very much the digitalized world is I think a huge opportunity. And for example, in our country, the traditional music is all the time have this connection with a little bit take care with the digitalization, with the modernity, with the things, and you know, and that was the things that I think we have to use these tools. You know, we have to use these tools to a little bit increase our message and increase the quality of education and transmission. So I think one of the, for example, the Polyphony project was absolutely such an example when the digital tools really helping to disseminating in a whole country actually one ICH message. So I think it is a very important part.
Just a small thought to add. And I think, of course, it depends on the scale of the project. But in my experience, it has been quite interesting to see how, like, this gap between generations and the use of technology also enables, like, pedagogical experience between families. And yeah, like a small example is how youth or kids are interviewing their, like, older parents or grandparents, asking questions about their traditions or teaching them to use cameras and like different formats. And this is quite interesting, no? Because it's also like how youth can teach older generations some things, and through ICH they connect and transmit different types of knowledges as well.
This is very much a debated question and very heatedly debated question in the field of conflict resolution and peacemaking, whether digital technologies and enhanced information exchanges improve or undermine peace efforts. And it seems very much like both are not only possibilities, but taking place simultaneously, even in same context. So the technological opportunities certainly bridge gaps, bring people together, or facilitate bringing people together and enhancing common awareness and the possibilities of coming together and creating a common agenda. But at the same time, and I would say also increase the possibility of identifying negative use of power. So in general, increase opportunity for transparency of how power is exercised. But then on the other hand, the powerful can also use the very same data and methodologies to target negatively individuals, communities, adversaries, internationally, locally, regionally, at any level. And we see this kind of a continuous competition between the vice and the virtue.
Good, thank you. And then any other questions? Yes, please, we wait for the microphone just a moment and Nora will take it to you.
Hello everyone. My name is Linus Omondi. I just came when you were continuing with the session, but I got something about digitization in the ICH. I'm actually a singer and a promoter and a performer of the ICH from Kenya. We do folk music and preserve the Kenyan African traditional music through dance and culture. And one of the ICH that has been also preserved and identified by UNESCO from Kenya is called the Isikuti dance, which is a dance that helps someone when you sing and you dance it removes pressure, it removes certain diseases from your body. And I'm happy that I'm here to say that, and I'm happy that you're talking about something that is very, very dear to my heart. So I was also asking if probably you have a database where you also input some of the African traditional ICH in your database, or how do we work together to input all these music, cultures and traditions? Because you find that in Kenya, we pass a message through generation to generation through oral literature. which is a word of mouth, what your grandfather or your great-grandfather told your grandfather told your father is telling you, you tell your son. So how do we work together to ensure that that is digitized in our African context? Thank you.
Any ideas or experiences on the African continent about this, the digitalization of heritage, if I understood it correctly, or anybody want to comment?
Yes, we had a project in Ethiopia, that's what I can say, and this was the project that in the 60s were recorded two Hungarian experts, one ethnochoreologist and one ethnomusicologist, and then we had the request something like 4 years ago that digitalizing this because it was analog techniques, and then creating a cultural databases where we interconnected all of this information. So if you're interested on it, this is in ethiofolk.com, and there is connected a lot of information like the fieldworks, notes, and the sound, and there is also film, silent movies, and photos, and different type of comments, but it was created like this, that in the website you can really it's contextualized everything, so it has the whole message and everything together. So I recommend you this as a good practice, but other hands, I'm not expert in this topic. ethiofolk.com.
Contextualization type of comment, and maybe coming back to the earlier question of if there's anything positive to share. Whilst there's lots of hopelessness about possibility of peace in Europe, and the main theory says now that interdependency is not leading to greater stability and peace, the simmering hope is that this is fairly European or sort of North Atlantic view on things, whereas in many other regions of the world, in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, and definitely in Africa, the opposite is true, that there's accumulating experience of greater cooperation, including in upholding and improving peace and security. And the African Union, regional, sub-regional organizations in Africa have much more experience and good experience of this work, including connecting with the civil society and civil society peace builders and movements. So from that point of view, I cannot comment on digitalization or ICH directly, but the peace and security context on the African continent is a source of hope globally.
Thank you. Then I think we will go to the final question to our panelists, and I think we should keep on the positive side here. So just like a suggestion to the audience now that they go to the festival, and our aim of this seminar is kind of promote the idea that the world would understand that ICH is important in communication, in collaboration, in peace building, on the macro level, but also in the personal kind of a personal level. So any hints or ideas of a personal approach? How can we work in a positive manner? Suggestion for tonight to the festival, please.
Nobody is positive. That should be me then. Yeah, I think we should dance tonight. Yeah. I think we should dance tonight because, you know, in the field work we have a lot of such experience that previously it's interesting transition of the art in before this. I'm just talking about the Ukrainian field works, that we see that the older generation, the elder generation, has the connection with the dance and singing, like it was a way of communication, you know. So many times if the ladies want to tell something, they start to telling, and after they start to sing a little bit, because this melody or this text is explaining what she wants, and after continue, and all the time asking me, you understand what I mean? After singing, you know. And also dance is a way of communication. What we cannot say, we will dance it, you know. What we cannot say, we will sing it, you know. So this type of diverse communication helps us a little bit getting closer. So I would recommend that tonight we have to sing and dance together. That's the future, right?
Diana?
I think, like my colleague just said it beautifully, and I think that's like the core of what I do, of my aim, is this idea of trying new things, exchanging in an embodied way. No, because like building peace through like discourses that are far away from our realities can be very beautiful, but if we don't experience it in a meaningful way, dancing through dance, through tasting like local foods, like having like an immersion of the context we are actually experience that diversity, and in that like practical experience, there's always the possibility to enhance our understanding of empathy, of respect, of having more fun, and just like a more caring way of life.
I was earlier talking about Afghanistan and discussing with Afghans earlier this year about possibilities of dialogue in their country. I learned or heard this Afghan proverb, which says that there's a purpose why human beings were giving 2 eyes, 2 ears, and only 1 mouth. So it's time for me to shut my mouth up and start experiencing. Thank you very much.
So we will give a big applause to our great panelists. Thank you very much. And thank you, our great audience here and online also. So we are about to finish here. And thank you for all the great ideas and great discussions. I think we went further here, and thank you also for our performers and the Borscht soup makers and our other guests who have been here involved. So have a great festival Saturday. Now, thank you and good day.